This is where everyone would click off at because it seemingly would be obvious reason stated the fact, and now it's other than running into the road to do this. When something happens in a split second, it can be a mere instant where another bad thing occurs. If this is what happens, it can in worse terms be called a double homicide. At any point in time, you can be an accessory to what might happen next. And if at any moment's notice you hear an explosion or smell something funny, it very well may be the last sensation that you'll ever have before something takes a turn for the worse. We live on the documenting these news segments. I popped that balloon, that was me. Yeah, that was me. Got, other than a hubcap, with other than something as a hubcap left spare, you can have a cap get caught in your wig, and that would be a hot despair. But in all reality, the worst things other than getting hit with a cap in the wig is being yourself having a bug get caught, catching a bug. There's nothing worse than getting a cap in your wig, unless it's catching a bug. So Ford just pulled out. I didn't have the camera on record. It was a police officer, and he said he doesn't want to have his picture taken. Off of your screen, just, it's the difference of not knowing your environment. So if you're making an interesting environment on your behest of the taxes, you know, God forbid any of your information on the internet has ever been taken and used, you using your information to put on the internet to do taxing should be noted. Just as if there's a cop pulling out of this parking lot behind me with a no badge on, him saying, "I am a cop," and then I'm wearing cops clothing. They wore cops clothing. It was a cop in an unmarked vehicle. I didn't record it. Blue Ford with the license plate, and he said he doesn't want me to take his picture, and he left really quickly. So I don't know what operation that was, but it was really suspicious, and I was on the curb the whole time talking to him from the parking lot. And so there's these guys going around, okay? This is what would be getting hacked on the street, not by a bad person, but I don't know if he was an actual cop or not. He told me he's not wearing his badge, and he got into this blue Ford with police clothing on. That could be, I think he's part of the state for real, because he seemed like a police officer. So, you know, you can get hacked by the government by not being aware of your surroundings by an officer just in clothing and not on duty with his badge. Whatever that means, it sounds like a setup, but essentially it would be a hack. I hope he's with the state, so then that would be how the state can catch you in the environment, you not knowing it, with something like a ticket if I was being rude to him. Luckily I wasn't, because I was on the curb recording, so I didn't take his picture, but he didn't want me to, but I still held the camera up to his license plate to show it wasn't state registered as a yellow undercover police license plate, which I thought they were supposed to have. So that's why I was putting the camera over it, but from the sidewalk I didn't take a picture, and it wasn't on record until I just hit it now. If you were to see irregularities between any instant in physics is called an initial, would be the universe is at its initial. You know, when we're looking out past planet Earth, you start hitting time warps because time bends as it's traveling to us. That means that irregulations from a trajectory from the beginning of time has a lot of deviations of paths. It's just when you jump to conclusions in certain things, there's a whole different notion in the court of law of justice. And what led up to that moment is much having to do with why it occurred in the first place. So knowing initial states of things in physics is important. It's also important to understand that if you're a coroner, autopsy reports, they made public. I asked for a phone recording of a call that I was making to a office of an entity. And so when they said, I'm going to transfer your call, that means that they ostensibly just dropped the line because they didn't want to provide a recording, because it was probably part of their job to do that if you're calling an entity's office that's associated with the state you live in. One thing I think cloud computing can do is put an umbrella over someone's head. And in terms of what that might mean is having all your senses, but not losing any touch. Computering is if you can do your taxes off a LCD screen on a cheap MP3 player. Could it be by design of a crystalline structure with a whole bunch of fanciful arrays, physical like games around it that just polarizes it on one angle? Such a thing could be made of all the taxes that you have to do, and all the taxes that you have to do could be mapped out in a polarization screen put over any type of small cheap screen. But if you're able to do your taxes from that, that's a thing that seems like hacking, but it would just be doing a really interesting operation with your taxes, which is the opposite of hacking, because when your taxes are being done, it's you abiding by the most clean system in the world, your relation with the government. Reality can happen different, such as in bullet time, when your heart speeds up. It seems like everything would go in slow motion. How much of this is a deterrent or an accelerant is not up for the law to debate. But for an actuary to understand, when you're eating a box of sugar, that going through your bloodstream has a different sensation when your heart is pumping in a rhythm that is there, irregulated through that blood sugar level. I'm calling out all the rich people in the entire world that they don't know what to do with their money. And why I'm so confident at saying this is because the ability to have items and then say that pontificating over the system's usage with what government has to offer, their items and tools. This guy pacing back and forth talking about items and tools. But then I thought to myself, I'm going to humble myself a bit, where there's cloud computing, this whole giant sector. You could call the whole private sector cloud computing. Give a F. And it's within these are specifically things that are itemized, but in linguistics of computer science it's called bifurcated. That's math. Math is the blueprint of computer science, so allocated or merge sorting. There we go. We're talking next level here, 4D chess. And So in describing the two accessibilities, it's daunting how blatantly obvious one is than the other. But in them being equally important in the court of law, having to describe this to a judge is why you need an attorney for these things. And that can be cost effective as a tool. A lady on the phone to me said that she's surrounded by these entities, her being in Madison. I said, well, that's a real clear way in putting it. Sometimes I get lost in Badger Circle and I think I'm in Madison. This Badger Circle being in Grafton of Ozaukee County, of course. And the two biggest districts in Wisconsin, the ones that would have the most money going through them for that reason alone, is the capital, Madison, and Milwaukee. Milwaukee has more people, but Madison's bigger because there's more money there. And there's more money there is because that's where the capital is and all its entity buildings around it with jobs they fulfill. And so that's why, I'm saying that all the rich people pontificating over the current technology where you're looking at these tiny bacterias that there's 3 layers of them just because there's 3 categories, and the more you say it on a lens, it's cliche, but that's usually technically a weapon. And like, you can get into heaven by not buying a weapon, but to create heaven on earth is like, you've got to be to people around you honest. And that's where the government in the Bible, took Jesus in, and that was the ultimate case. Because in biblical terms, he wanted to be denounced as the king. The king is the one who with all the money. The king of the Jews. Other things that are related to the state that you live in can be called more and more assortments of cloud computing.